He talks about how he was over, I don't know how many Satanists, call them churches. He was like the bishop.
You gotta be kidding me.
What was in her heart? You don't know what sin she'd committed. You don't know how much unbelief was there. You don't know whether she hated her husband.
I don't think so.
Why would anybody spend so much time ranting and raving about something that they don't believe in?
Really?
Welcome to Skeptics Brew Pub with Brother Brewer. And I am joined tonight by the lovely and talented Marissa McCool. She is a college student, author, podcaster, activist, and about a bazillion other things. So how are you doing tonight, Marissa?
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm flattered that I've already made you stutter twice.
Well, So why don't you go ahead and tell my listeners a little bit about yourself?
Well, that's a pretty broad category, so I'll do my best to summarize. I am Marissa Alexa McCool. I'm 31, recently out trans woman, and I am in my last semester at the University of Pennsylvania. I will graduate in May. I am an author. One book under my current name. That's probably what I'm most known for right now. It's called The PC Lie, How American Voters Decided I Don't Matter. I have another one coming out called False Start. It's a novel. That'll be out within a couple months or so. And I host the Inciting Incident podcast. I've done 80 episodes of that. We just had our 80th drop on Friday.
Oh, wow.
A columnist on lordsofpain.net for 6 years or so. And in between that, I do photography, videography, and anything else under the sun that keeps me from having a real job.
Oh, cool. So tell me a little bit about your book, because unfortunately I haven't had a chance to read it. I hadn't had a chance to get my hands on it. What was the inspiration for it, and what's it about?
Well, if the title is too subtle, it's calling out all the people who said that the biggest problem in society in 2016 was that everything has gotten too PC and everybody is so easily offended. And a lot of that apologist bullshit was rampant when Trump got elected. And as a trans woman, it was a terrifying time, and that hasn't subsided. I spent that weekend in Fort Lauderdale, and I was at an anime convention, and I just saw everybody was terrified. The people I were with, especially, because all three of us are queer in some way. And school that Monday, I just started writing in a class. I wasn't even paying attention to what I was writing as much as I was just venting, getting some catharsis, thing that was going on. And when I looked down, I had 30 pages.
Oh, wow.
And I emailed Andrew Torres and said, do you think I could make a book out of this? He's like, yeah. So I wrote the book in 9 days. It's not just a bunch of fuck yous, but I think that would sell just as well as this point. But yes, my story, what it was like to come out as a trans woman, what it was like for someone such as myself, election with everything going on, criticizing a lot of the people who like to throw out the term social justice warrior as a pejorative, or criticize safe spaces or trigger warnings when my inner Inigo Montoya keeps going off going, you mean. So it was a combination. I told the story of my wedding. I wrote a letter to anybody who was still in the closet. I tried to cover as many different voices that were possibly needing to be heard at the time. Chris Cluey from the Vikings, the guy who went viral for writing a letter in support of same-sex marriage back in 2012, he wrote the foreword and has since become a friend of mine. Other contributors include Andrew Torres, Eli Bosnick, one of our former co-hosts, my husband. So there were a lot of different people reached out to me before the book was even released. And since it's been released, in combination with me coming out and being so visible and loud, It's been a snowball effect. Ever since I came out, everything has just multiplied by 100 since that happened. And for someone who spent the first 30 years of their life being relatively unknown and unsuccessful, I tried a lot of different endeavors before this happened. It's very humbling, I'll say that. But now that I've gotten known in so many different places since writing the book, new people paying attention to the podcast and getting to be on so many shows like this one, it's incredible. And I'm grateful to be a voice for a group that is not only marginalized, but largely discounted and misunderstood. So given my level of education and experience in the world, I figure I have a lot to say and I have the credentials to back it up.
Okay. Well, I guess another question I've got then, we talked about also that you have a podcast. What it's called, the Inciting Incident. How did that come about, and what's its whole appeal?
Well, it used to be a film podcast. We started trying to do a film podcast for the university because sometimes you can get those things funded. There's a place on our campus called the Kelly Writers House, and they have a studio in the building, and you can use it for free. But if you get funding, you can get actually paid to do work. Imagine that. Wow. So we tried. It was too late in the semester to get funding. This was February last year. And I went home that day and said, fuck it, let's just do it ourselves. So we started. It was largely pop culture, analytical, tropes based in media. But it wasn't before long that a lot of people started asking our opinion on social justice issues, because this was when the 2016 election was really picking up. And I think it was pretty obvious that I was not a Trump fan. I did an editorial after the 6th episode that was just a 50-minute, holy shit, I'm terrified of Donald Trump and here's why. And that got a lot of attention from both sides of the perspective. But, a lot of people told me that I was overreacting, being paranoid, worried about nothing, and that they're not saying a whole lot to me right now, and I can't figure out why.
Yeah, that's kind of...
Yeah, it's almost like they were completely full of shit or something.
I know.
So, yeah. I noticed that the social justice and current events issues that we were doing were more popular than the film stuff by an exponential margin. So we tried to do both at first. We'd be like, hey, let's do the serious shit on Friday and then have fun on Sunday. And that lasted about a month before I just looked at my occasional co-host at this point, Brian, and said, why don't we just do the Friday show? It's working so much better. So that was more of a recent development. We were just reaching and connecting with so many more people when we were talking about shit that actually mattered. And it almost felt like a responsibility to keep doing that, because the whole point of our show in that regard was to discuss uncomfortable topics and things people don't like to talk about. One of the subtitles that we used early on was forbidden from the dinner table. So, everybody always says, don't discuss politics and religion at the dinner table. Well, let's fucking discuss politics and religion. Who gives a shit? And that's pretty much the idea of our show. Inciting incident is a film term for the moment in the film that makes everything else happen. And if we can use our ability to have rational and reasonable conversations about things that people don't like to talk about or feel like they can't, then we've sort of at least incited a conversation. Whether or not people agree with us, whether or not they end up agreeing with each other, we can at least get them talking about it. Because the only way to humanize these things is to talk about it. And then once I came out on episode 70, which was right around the same time as the book was being written and everything. And ever since then, it's gone through the roof, especially with speaking out about trans issues, LGBT issues, and social justice in general.
Okay, now your actual coming out story, I thought, was kind of, excuse me, kind of interesting. You actually came out I think you were yelling at a street preacher. Was that what happened? How did that go?
I was counter protesting against a Westboro Baptist hate pastor. My nickname for him is Pastor Carl, because on our show, whenever we want to yell at somebody who's like actually a real person who might hear it, we just substitute the name Carl, and we go #fuck you, Carl. And there is no bigger fuck you, Carl than Pastor Carl. And he had been to our campus multiple times. This was about October. And, I used to be under that philosophy that you should just ignore bullies. They'll go away. These people just want attention. But as I saw the rise of Donald Trump, I realized, no, when you ignore a bully, they get more confidence and people start listening to what they say. And then suddenly you have a mass that believes this bullshit. And he was just spouting it. And he was yelling at children. They're children to me because I'm 31 on a college campus, but these are 17, 18-year-old kids that he's calling sluts and whores and drunkards and, whoremongers, just all these names. And at one point he claimed to be without sin. And I'm like, I am but a simple and ignorant heathen, but I'm pretty sure that's blasphemy to claim to be without sin. I don't know. And he did this thing where he challenged anybody to be judged. And at that point, I had been trolling him for a good hour and a half because I figured if he was yelling at me, he wasn't yelling at somebody who couldn't handle it. And I was like, yeah, judge me. What the hell? I'll put my hand on your Bible, whatever. And, he asked me questions about my life. Do you drink alcohol? Yes. Oh, you're a drunkard. Just that dramatic too. I'm probably underselling it. And then at one point he said something along the lines of, are you going to raise your children to be interested in LGBT rights and activists? I was like, yeah. And he goes, oh, you're a bad daddy. And I was like, oh, fuck, no, you did not just say that. So he finally comes out after about 5 minutes and goes, on a scale 1 to 10, 10, you're definitely going to hell. You're a 9. You're going to hell, but at least you're honest about it. You're not like these kids who try to fight me on it. And I just went, you want me to make it a 10? Yeah, you want me to make it a 10? I'm transgender. Fuck you. And I walked away.
Nice. Also, your husband is also transgender, and I think we're actually setting something up, hopefully, that in the future that I'm talking with him and a couple of other people on a panel in a couple of months. As someone who's a cis male, and I have my brother-in-law who's my sometimes co-host is also trans. Sure. What kind of challenges do you guys face on a daily basis that maybe someone like me may not necessarily see and understand at times?
Okay. Let me see if I can sort of ask you a couple questions to put it into a context for you. All right.
Okay.
Has there ever been something you've been going through in your life that you feel is right and justified and it's very important to you, but no matter what you do, there's always a group of people or select individuals, maybe even family, who are telling you that you're wrong and you're a bad person for doing it, or anything like that, where you're just constantly being criticized?
Yeah, I'd have to say being an atheist, it probably hits that.
Okay, let's use being an atheist for an example then. Okay, let's just say you were born atheist. And everybody knew that you were born atheist. No argument about it. You had the Star Trek A or whatever it's called right on your chest. It was just blatantly obvious. And for, say, 20 years, you were known as an atheist. People treated you like an atheist, and everybody expected you to be an atheist because that's how you were born. But you kind of had interest in learning about Zen Buddhism. And, at first it was just curiosity, but the more you explored Zen Buddhism, it seemed more interesting and that maybe you could learn something from it. And everybody that you know says, but you're an atheist. You can't be a Zen Buddhist. You can't. That's not how you were born. You have the red A. That's on your body. You can't change that. So imagine you finding something that completely fulfills you, something that you were completely sure of when you decided that you were of sound mind and age, understand it, and make the decision that you were going to live as a Zen Buddhist because that's who you really were. And a whole bunch of people told you that you're going to hell for it, that you're completely wrong, that you'll never actually be a Zen Buddhist. You will always be an atheist because that's what you were born with, and that's what it says on your chest. Be transgender.
Okay.
You grow up socialized as one thing, and you ignore everything that goes to the contrary because that's what you're supposed to do. But then it just gets too much. You're not able to ignore it anymore. And you start living as who you really are, and you are exponentially happier. You are expressing yourself. You are so free and happy. But there's either a small percentage to maybe everybody who tells you that who you are is defined by your genitals, or it's defined by what's on your birth certificate, or it's defined by what's on your ID. And you just get to the point where you're like, you don't have more of a right to my identity than I do. I know who I am more than you do because I'm me. You're not. And I am not a sum of my parts. Like you're saying that if a woman has a penis, then she's not a woman. Well, if a woman gets a hysterectomy or a mastectomy, is she no longer a woman because she no longer has those parts? You're projecting a definition of a person based on a sum of their parts rather than who they are. And that is fucking bullshit. So knowledge, and especially those of us who are public figures like myself, you have these people you have never met or spoken to telling you who you really are and intentionally misgendering you and calling you the wrong name. And I had to tell them, like, look, if you're saying that this is what you think I am, you're saying I'm wrong, my husband's wrong, my family's wrong, all my friends and listeners are wrong, everybody who bought my book is wrong, all 3 of my psychiatrists at UPenn are wrong, and the 42,000 people who recognize me as Marissa at that university, not to mention all over the country, are wrong. Are you smarter than them? I don't think you're smarter than them.
Okay. Yeah, that was just I'm trying to, in some ways, I probably have a lot of listeners that maybe don't understand what it's like. So I wanted to get that out there to give them an idea of what that's like and why, at least for me, that I push so hard for the transgender community, for the LGBT community in general, even though I am, I'm a bi cis male.
That counts. That letter's in there.
But I'm also married to a woman, so I can pass as, cis straight without any problems. So I don't get a lot of the things, but I still push really hard because even though it doesn't affect me personally, it still is something that, affects people. And unless you're a really shitty human being, you want what's best for people. And so you want everybody, at least I think you should want everybody to be treated the way that they want to be treated, and a lot of this stuff doesn't really matter, like who you are, who your husband is, or anybody else. It really doesn't affect my life. So why do I need to even really worry about it? As far as, whatever goes on, that's your thing. That's not me. And so who cares?
Absolutely. And, we have a lot of people who are not in any way affected by all this bathroom bullshit telling us that it's no big deal. And And I'm sorry, I don't think you're qualified to tell me that it's no big deal when it literally affects you zero. When Bill Maher is doubling down on this bullshit. And I liked Bill Maher until recently. But, even yesterday, he's doubling down on it by saying, that we're making a big deal out of nothing and everybody's offended over this stupid thing. And, Caitlyn Jenner's an idiot, which I agree with. But, he's doubling down on telling people that it's no big deal that they're being told where they can or cannot go to the bathroom. And it's like, well, no fucking shit, Bill. You're not affected by this. You're going to go to the same bathroom that you always do. We're the ones who have to be afraid to use the bathroom that we're fucking dressed as just because some shitty people started an argument when they lost the fight about gay marriage and then decided to blame us for them starting the argument. And then liberal apologists pretty much went, yeah, that's a boutique issue. It's really stupid. It's distracting from reality. And it's like, well, why are you yelling at us? They're the ones who suddenly decided to care about this. We've been using the bathroom associated with our gender identity since there were gender identities. This is fucking stupid.
Yeah, and I think whenever I get into that debate on Facebook with someone who maybe is lacking a couple of brain cells, and they tell me that, gender, they try to, first of all, equate gender and sexuality and sex as the same thing, which it's not. But then they start saying, well, if you have a penis, you belong in the men's room. If you have a vagina, you belong in the women's room. And the first thing I'll do is throw up a picture of Buck Angel and say, okay, where does he go?
Yeah, and I hate when people think that, your genitalia is what makes you a thing, because you wouldn't ask anybody else that question. That would not be the first thing that you ask to any other person. I've done stand-up, and my opening line is always, people always come up when they find out you're trans and say, oh, did you have the surgery yet? And you know what they're really meaning, right? Did you get your dick chopped off yet? Who else is that appropriate to? No, you can't go up to a regular cis woman and be like, I see that you're a woman. We acknowledge that you're a woman. Do you have huge tits or just tiny areolas? I'm just asking. I'm just asking. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, have you got the baloney nipples going on, or what's going on? You never ask that.
Exactly. Clearly, that should be my opening line after determining your gender.
I think another thing that was fun in the argument that I maybe made them think was, I said, first of all, a penis is not going to detach itself from this person and just go off on a fuck spree. It's not happening.
Although I'd like to see like an Adult Swim movie where that is a thing. That would be amazing.
Well, I don't know, because it'd be pretty easy to deflate that, because it'd be like, oh, get out of here, you little prick, and he'd be done.
And they call it Donald.
More than likely.
The little prick that deflates easily.
And going back to Mara, I was going to ask you about I had asked you about the Bozo of the Week, and you had nominated Bill Maher.
Yeah.
What's the story behind that?
Well, Bill Maher has never been a friend of the trans community, but it seemed like recently when he had Janet Mock on the panel that he was at least trying to understand this. And I didn't get it because he was such an advocate for same-sex marriage and, fighting so hard for people like that and telling everybody who disagreed, fuck you. So it would stand to reason that someone who champions most liberal causes would see another marginalized group who's been fucked over by the system and be on our side. But instead he resorts to making, dude in a dress jokes or calling us weirdos peeing. And maybe it's because he's just older. I don't know. But he just, like I said, he doubled down on it. I wanted to nominate him for Bozo of the Week for the bullshit he said last week when he was chumming with Milo Fuckface. But he apparently responded to it by taking credit for getting Milo, deplatformed, and then coming out in the opening monologue and making more trans jokes and then getting upset when nobody found it funny. He pulled the Jeb Bush. He was like, laugh. No. I used to like you before you doubled down on this shitty opinion.
Well, I guess I'm a weirdo then, because I never really found Bill Maher to be funny. Or at
Fair.
least I was never a fan of him. My first real experience catching anything of his was the movie that he did, that documentary Religulous.
Mhm.
And I was like, you're just going after the extremes here. You know, you're not really saying anything. You're just basically making a joke out of it. This isn't serious. So, I mean, from that point on, everything that I saw from him, everything that I've heard from him has been low-hanging fruit, it seems like. It's like the issues that everybody is talking about, that's the ones that he's going to be after. But when it comes to something like the transgender issues, or even addressing Islamophobia, and I'll admit, I do not like Islam as a religion, but that's just because I don't like religion in general,
Sure.
And so I mean, he's just never been really that much of a draw for me. I'm just weird like that, I guess.
I guess he caught me in the I'm liberal, I'm really angry, and I don't know why age, because being 31, I was about 9. I was 19 during the 2004 election, and when GW won, you just had all this young anger that you couldn't really understand, but you just wanted someone to say, fuck Republicans, fuck all this bullshit. And there were people like Lewis Black and Bill Maher and Jon Stewart, and they all had their different flavors of saying it, but I just soaked all of it in that I could, because I live in a super red area. So I needed that counterbalance. And I always liked Bill Maher's show because he was one of the few people who was willing to have those from the other side on and engage them.
Right.
But I've discovered a lot of great people from his panels. Anyone from Neil deGrasse Tyson to Janet Mock to he's had so many great people on his panels. So even if I hate him, which he's pushing it right now, I try to tune in for the panel discussions because I never know who I'm going to see on there. Okay,
that's fair. Well, speaking of the bozos, I had a couple that I was going to nominate today, and then I think it may have been Friday, or just yesterday, that I heard about this other bozo that I wanted to throw in there. And that first one, the newest one, I'll go with that one first, was Caitlyn Jenner. And I really hate being in a position of defending her going or saying anything about her, because she's just such a conservative twit that it just kills me. But right. I think it was yesterday that she tweeted out, or she said that she was really upset with the Trump administration, with Donald Trump, and she wanted Donald to call her because of what he was doing with these, with the bathroom bill and on transgender rights. And she was very upset. And it's like, lady, he told you what he was going to do, and you just weren't listening. So why are you mad now? Because he told you he was going to do this. He's doing what he said. So,
Yeah.
But what's your opinion on her? Because I know mine personally is that, like I said, she's just a super conservative twit that, is just needs to really get an idea of what's going on.
She is a shitty person. You don't have to make fun of her for being transgender to say that she's a shitty person. If you had come on here and made, a dick in a dress joke, or called her Bruce, that's shitty. That's a terrible thing to do. But someone being transgender does not make them beyond criticism, and does not mean they're an automatic good. Like, I don't get upset when people disagree with me, or even if people don't like me, but you call me Marissa and you call me her. There's a difference. Do you see the difference? What I mean there?
Yeah, I completely understand it. It's kind of like with comedy, the idea of punching up and not down. That when you're going after something like that, you don't try to punch down at them, but you try to punch up more at yourself. Or you wouldn't necessarily like jokes about, like you were saying about Caitlyn Jenner. You wouldn't joke about her surgeries or anything like that. You just hit on the facts that she's a shitty person.
There's plenty of material there without misgendering her.
And that's just like when I was reviewing I think it was an abysmal remake of Rocky Horror that came out around Halloween. I loved the performances by everybody, and I'm sorry, the name of the actress is, I'm blanking on her right. Laverne Cox. That's it, Laverne Cox. And, I just felt like seeing her playing Dr. Frankenfurter, it was like she was trying too hard to be Tim Curry, and that's where a lot of my criticism was, that she didn't take the part and make it her own. She was trying to repeat what he did. And it didn't matter to me.
That's part of the problem with roles that are so ubiquitous like that. It'd be like trying to remake A Streetcar Named Desire and not do Brando. That role is just so ingrained with Marlon Brando that anything that wasn't Marlon Brando would be rejected. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that way. Laverne Cox she probably could have made that her own performance, but then people would have said, oh, it's not Tim Curry, I don't like it. So that was probably a movie that just shouldn't have been remade.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that I think they should have just left the original alone and let it, because even after 40 years, it still stands very well on its own.
It does. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the story itself, but the music is still so good.
Oh, I know. It's a really, as far as movie making goes, it's a shitty movie.
Yeah.
But for me, what I love about it is the audience participation, and you get to make, even after everything, you still get to make up shit and throw in new lines and stuff, and it continues to grow.
Yeah, it does. It never gets old to see in a group. Same with The Room. I love going to audience participation showings of that too.
See, I've not watched that yet. I've still
need to.
I've still got to sit down. Everybody says I need to, and I can quote just about every line from it because I've heard them. Like, "You're tearing me apart, Lisa." But
you are part of my life. You are everything. I could not go on without you, Lisa.
Oh, and then another bozo that I had, and this guy, he's from Iowa. It's Representative Steve King. He just put out, and the reason that this hit my radar was partly because of Betsy DeVos, but he just put out House Resolution 610, which would basically kill the entire Education and Elementary Act of, I think it was 1960, which includes Title IX and everything else. Just completely kill that and turn the Department of Education into a voucher giving organization, and it would be giving money to schools based on how many students between 5 and 17 were going there, but it doesn't go to the schools themselves. It goes to the parents of those schools, and then they can take it and either go to public school and pay the public school, or they can take it out and go to this charter school and pay them. And there's another part of it that gets rid of the nutritional standards that were passed in 2012. It adds a line in there that pretty much makes it null and void. But what made me the angriest was the attack on education itself. Because I have two kids that are right now one's about to turn 8 and the other one's going to turn 11 this year, or turn 10 this year. And I want for them the best education that they can get. And I think that in general, we should want all of our kids to get the best education that they can, and everybody should have a right to it, because that's something that all boats rise with that. I mean, not like when you when you have the elites educated and nobody else, but, you've still got that class system. But when everybody is given the same quality education, everybody's lives are better. So I really, that's why he was my second nomination for Bozo. Now, along with Bill Maher, did you have another person maybe that you thought might deserve the honor?
There are plenty of people I could pick, but Bill Maher's been the one that's stuck in my craw in the last couple of weeks, just because he should know better at this point. There's a lot of people saying shitty things, but Bill Maher's Ivy League educated and he's incredibly intelligent. He should not have this much trouble gathering the fact that we're people. It's not that difficult.
Okay. Yeah, and then my last one, he's more of a local pick, and he was the former mayor of the town that I live in, and now he's our congressman. It's Congressman Steve Womack. And the reason that I'm giving him a nod for the bozo was because, since Congress is out of session right now, they're on a break. Most of them are hiding from their constituents right now because everybody's a little bit pissed off because they figured out that the ACA is actually a good thing.
Wow.
Yeah. If you don't call it Obamacare, everybody loves it. But he, in his town hall, accused everybody that was in there of being just a bunch of liberal shills. He told the people that were there that he was, they didn't vote for him, and so he didn't have to answer to them because he didn't consider them a part of his constituency. And he was just an asshole to this whole group of people. There were about 120 people inside the building with him, and then scores of other people that were standing outside that had tried to get in to talk to him or listen to what he had to say. And he basically just blew them off because, well, you didn't vote for me, and Arkansas went for Trump by a very large margin, so you're just stuck with him, and that's all there is to it. Deal with it. So, yeah, he's just an asshole all around.
Yeah, there's plenty of people like that right now that are perfectly content to not do a goddamn thing, and they are not allies.
Yeah, that's true. But going through, I think since we both agree on that last one, I'm pretty sure I think we'll put Bill Maher as the bozo of the week for this week. Because,
cheers, thank you.
Yeah, not just because of his statements on transgenderism, which was a really big turnoff for me. I mean, I nearly threw my computer out the window when he turned to the person next to him and said, "So how do you feel about weirdos peeing?" I was like,
yeah, and it was a Republican who agreed with him.
I was like, you didn't go there. I know you didn't do that. But, that, and then the whole trying to take credit for Milo's downfall when, no, not even close. And then thirdly, I mean, the stuff that Milo had said, he had, about 20 years ago, he had said something similar, but it was along the lines of, it's the boys, when you hear about the teachers, that it's the female teacher and the underage boy, that it was the boys that were the predator because, they knew not so much they were the predator, but they knew what they were doing. And, so there was no way that actually his line was, you can't rape a guy. And I was like,
yeah,
oh no. So he's an all around asshole in my book, but yep, he gets the bozo of the week for this week.
Yeah. And I really wish he knew better because he's smart enough to do so.
Now, outside of your activism, you also have a column that you write on wrestling.
Yes, I do. I'm a. Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you about that, about your history on that, because I think you're one of two people that I know that are not only transgender but are also former professional wrestlers.
Well, there's not much of a cross-section for transgender former pro wrestlers, so I kind of fit a couple niche markets there. But I was a pro wrestler long before I transitioned. I spent 3 years being absolutely terrible and getting the shit kicked out of me, but it was... I was young, stupid, and was able to go after a dumb dream at the time. But what helped me was I learned so much. I was able to understand a lot of things that my body couldn't do and then turn around and write about it. So I started writing for the forums on lordsofpain.net. And, there are people who've been writing there for 10 years that have never gotten to the main page. And I would say the forums, if you write a really good column, you might get 1,000 views. But Lords of Pain gets, like, the main site gets millions of views. So it's two completely different markets. And I got promoted to the main page within, I think, 4 months. Like, it was not a long time at all. And I wrote about the current product through the lens of somebody who knew some of these people, who had the, not the WrestleMania experience, but enough experience to have perspective on what they're doing. And then a lot of what I do in the column is make a lot of pop cultural references and crossover references just to blend a lot. It's almost like a running diary combined with a stand-up act is how I would describe what I do. I just write whatever comes to my mind based on what I'm watching, whether or not it's actually relevant. And with the exception of a couple of shitty misgendering assholes this week, people take to it. I mean, they would have to. I published column number 271 this week, so somebody likes it.
Oh, wow. See, and I, as a kid and even as a young adult in the 90s, I really liked watching wrestling. I wasn't a big, at the time, it was WWF fan, but I really got into it started off as the NWA, and then later was the name changed to WCW when Ted Turner started taking it bigger. But I always loved watching it at that younger age. But it seemed like after Vince McMahon took over so much of the wrestling market that it lost an appeal to me, because part of what I liked about it wasn't just, these big hulking brutes beating each other, but there were storylines and you could follow these things. It was almost like a soap opera for guys, pretty much. Is what it felt like.
And that's always been its appeal. It's escapism, but it's escapism in the same way that sports or movies or TV shows can be, except they're live. They may not actually be fighting, but there's nothing wrong with having catharsis in latching onto a character, even if it's simulated combat or simulated action. Mm-hmm. Nobody goes to a movie and says, I bet those two aren't really fighting. It's stupid.
Right. And I think, I saw some wrestlers that, when I watched them, their raw talent was just, to me, it seemed spectacular. The one match that always stands out in my mind was when it was the debut match of Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit in the ring at the same time, and I would swear these men's feet never touched the mat for more than 2 seconds. It was almost all aerial maneuvers and these it was just beautiful to watch. And that was one of the things that drew me in, was that these guys that were being able to do these spectacular stunts. And it was just, to me, it was like poetry. And I don't see a whole lot of that in today's wrestling when I do, pick up and watch it, because a lot of the people, especially in WWE right now, are either the really old stable guys that have been around forever and their bodies are breaking down, or it's the really young guys that are still learning the ropes. There's not a whole lot of that talent that's, at its peak right now. And I think that's another thing that's
definitely true.
Because guys like The Undertaker, when I would watch him in his older matches and watching his last couple of matches that I saw, it was, it was like watching a different match, and it just wasn't the same. But, that's
yeah, I know what you mean. Kind of like you're more concerned about his well-being than you are the actual match.
Oh yeah, because like when I watched his one match with, it was with Brock Lesnar, the day that he or it was, I think it might have been SummerSlam. And the only reason that I had actually turned it on was because Stephen Amell from The Arrow, who one of those guys that I just absolutely, I watch anything that he's in. And he was wrestling Stardust, Cody Rhodes. And so that was the only reason I tuned in, but I caught that match, and through half of it, I'm like going, oh my God, I hope he doesn't die in the ring.
Yeah.
Because he just looked so, it wasn't that he looked bad, but it was, he just looked like he was outclassed, and it was hard for Brock Lesnar, I think, to kind of pull his punches enough.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So I think that's what's turned me off of wrestling, except for Botchamania. I don't know if have you caught those on YouTube?
Oh yeah.
My wife gets mad at me because I'll sit there and I'll just like play 4 or 5 episodes in a row just to watch it and listen to these guys that are yelling their moves, and they accidentally get hot mics, and you're like, That's something else that you didn't hear a whole lot of in the older days too. You didn't hear a lot of the hot miking, but that may have just been sound issues. The sound technology is so much better now.
Oh, absolutely. And the buildings have better acoustics, and it's just all around different now. And I try to appreciate it for what it is, but I do miss some of those days that you're talking about.
Yeah. Now, as far as the modern crew goes, do you have any favorites as far as wrestlers right now?
Right now, I really like Dean Ambrose because I followed him back when he was John Moxley. I think he's got a Brian Pillman thing going on with this crazy eccentric guy. Let's see. The problem is my two favorite wrestlers of the recent era either retired or left. Those were Daniel Bryan and CM Punk, both people that I followed on the indies all the way up. Let's see. I like Kevin Owens. I really like Cesaro. Most of the people I like are people that I knew back then, either as a coworker or as someone that I watched on the indie scene and was really able to latch onto. The guy who does the commentating now, Corey Graves, agented the first match I ever won, and I spent 10 weeks training with him. So there's loyalty there that wouldn't be there if I had not been a wrestler.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I know that when I talk with my friend Erin, who is also a pro wrestler, she's still really big into it, and I don't know. It's just when you talk to her or when I talk to you about it, I start to get some of that excitement back that I used to when I would watch, back when Sting was actually Sting and he wasn't like this Crow knockoff that he's been for 20 years. I miss those days of wrestling. Those are, when, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes was wrestling, that's when I started watching, when Ric Flair didn't have the pot belly going on.
Well, it happens to the best of us eventually.
Yeah, I can attest to that personally. But that's just for me what it was like. And I guess when I watch it with my son, and we watch the Botchamania more than anything else, and he insists on watching that horrible documentary from the 90s. It was done by the same people that did The Masked Magician, but it was on wrestling.
Was it Beyond the Mat?
I don't know if it was Beyond the Mat, if that's what it was. But they basically took, it was like 4 or 5, they were the lower rung wrestlers and masked them just like they would The Masked Magician. But they went and exposed all the moves that these guys do and all of the things for the storyline, and a lot of it was BS. And going back and they talked to some of the guys that did it, they will tell you that, what they said and what wound up on the TV was a lot different. But, he'll watch that with me, and it helps me to tell him, some of this stuff does happen like this, but a lot of it is not. But when we watch wrestling together the few times, we sit and we watch for some of these things so that he understands. Just like when we go to a magic show now and he watched that Masked Magician thing, I say, okay, now don't tell them how the trick works. I know you figured it out, but don't say anything.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, so what's on the horizon for you? What are you planning in the future? What's coming up for Marissa McCool? As far as the future.
Well, like I said, I got a novel coming out here in the next month or two. It all depends on when the other contributors get their stuff in. So that's called False Start, and that should be available on Amazon. And like my other book, you can get personal copies signed by me if you email rismcwriting@gmail.com. I'm willing to send them out and sign them to you and everything. I'm making a lot of appearances around the country in the next few months. I'll be at Utah Pride. I'll be in LA and Jacksonville in March. I will be at ReasonCon. I will be hosting my own 100th episode special in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, with guests, the Gaytheist Manifesto, Opening Arguments, Scathing Atheist, and Chris Cluey will all be there.
Oh, wow.
So that's, I've got one hell of a lineup coming in. Andrew Torres called it like a mini skeptic podcaster convention. and that's going to be a lot of fun. Tickets are available if you go, you follow us on Facebook or anything, Inciting Incident Podcast. You can find that out. I'm graduating from UPenn in May, so I'll probably be moving. I don't know. We'll see. I'll be moving around a lot more because I'm getting booked to speak in places. I'll be in Vermont pretty soon. So I really don't know where I'm going to be. I just know I'm going to be all over the place and moving around a lot.
Oh, cool. So if people want to catch more of your podcast or just hear more from you, maybe read your wrestling articles or whatever, how can they find you on the internet?
The easiest way is RissMcCool.com, RISMCCOOL. That has all my information on it. Inciting Incidents available on all the podcast apps, iTunes, anything like that. You can also follow incitingincidentpodcast.com. That takes you to the same site as RissMcCool.com. So either or. If you want to read my Lords of Pain column, you can go to Lords of Pain and search under columns. I write them after each Raw and SmackDown. I write them live as they're going on, so they're usually out right after. Books are on Amazon, Marissa Alexa McCool, or like I said, you can email me there. And I write a blog for the site as well. That's incitingincidentpodcastblog.wordpress.com. And we just started a second podcast. Well, someone started a podcast and brought me on it called Doubting Dogma. There's one episode of that out so far. It's sort of someone I corrupted, an ex-Mormon who I told to listen to Cognitive Dissonance, and now she's one of us. So that's kind of the whole point of that.
Well, every bit of good works helps.
Indeed. And if you search my name, you'll find the 487 podcasts I've been on recently. Anything from God Awful Movies to Gaytheist Manifesto to Skeptics Brew Pub. I've been all over the place recently, so I'm not hard to find.
Okay. Well, thank you very much again for coming on here, Riss. I really do appreciate it. And that's going to wrap it up for this week's episode of Skeptics Brew Pub. I'm Brother Brewer. I want to thank Marissa McCool again for coming on the show. I do apologize for the really rough cut there at the end. Unfortunately, I'm still trying to figure out this audio software. And this is why I like to do the show live, because I'm still trying to figure out how to cut and paste all of this stuff together. But we're going to work on that some more this week. I'm also going to work on my video production a little bit more. It seems that I've got a little bit to learn because my recording software for the video ate about 45 minutes of the video interview. So this interview will be hopefully the last one of audio only. Next week I will bring up the entire video and audio. We'll do video on YouTube. We'll do that live, and then the audio will be uploaded to Spreaker and to skepticsbrewpub.com a little bit later on, and that's where you can find all of our episodes at skepticsbrewpub.com. The player is on the homepage, so you can go and listen to or download any past episodes you want to. If you want to help donate to the show and help me learn how to figure this stuff out a little bit more and maybe get some equipment that can run all that I want to do, you can support us at patreon.com/skepticsbrewpub, and I would greatly appreciate that. If you want to keep up with what's going on in the world this week, in the world of Skeptics Brew Pub and in general of what's going on in the universe, you can go to facebook.com/beer and blasphemy, and that's where you'll find Skeptics Brew Pub Facebook page. If you want to send in hate mail, fan mail, or the bozo of the week, you can send that either as message me on the Facebook page, or you can send that to Brother Brewer at skepticsbrewpub.com. Next week on the show, we will be having the Canadian podcast group Brainstorm coming on. They are from, I believe, Saskatchewan. Last year they had the Shift to Reason convention, which was really cool, and I'm thinking they might be trying to pull that off again this coming year, so keep your eyes and ears out for that. We do have NanoCon, of course, is coming up in March, and then in April, the March one, that's in Nashville, Tennessee. You can find more information on their page, or go Google for NanoCon 2017. That's the Nashville Nuns Convention. Also, in April, will be ReasonCon 3 over in Hickory, North Carolina. And unfortunately, I won't be able to make it this year, but I am hoping to at least try to make Skepticon this year. But until then, we'll go ahead and close this out for the night with our usual closing theme song of Anacreon in Heaven. So until then, believe nothing that you hear, half of what you see, and never start a serious conversation without a 2-drink minimum. Good night, guys.
Anacreon in heaven, where he sat in full glee. A few sons of harmony sent a petition that he their inspirer and patron would be. When this answer arrived from the jolly old Grecian, voice, fiddle, and flute no longer be mute. I'll lend you my name and inspire you to boot. And besides, I'll instruct you like me to entwine the myrtle of Venus with Bacchus's vine. And besides, I'll instruct you like me to entwine the myrtle of Venus